start by asking some basic questions. You work for the Arleston Archives. What are they? Where do they come from, and what's their purpose? And what kind of work do you do there?
Mhm. Thank you, Arash, for this opportunity. The Artisan Archives are the worldwide largest archive on the victims of persecution by the National Socialists. And we actually have more than 30 million original historical documents and many more documents that have been actually collected over the past 75 years. And indeed, the Artisan Archives are an old institution that was set up immediately after the Second World War in order to collect all the evidence about the crimes by the Nazis, about persecution, about deportation, about incarceration. And this documentation was supposed to help families to find their loved ones. Because as we know, during the war and due to the persecution by the Nazis, millions of people were persecuted and millions of families were torn apart. But there are many crimes that are not documented at all because not everything was documented. And the Nazis managed to destroy a lot of documentation at the end of the war. And also because of the war and the bombings, etc., a lot of paper was destroyed. So in many cases, we don't have documents, original historical documents. What we have are the testimonies by the families who are looking for information.
I'm sure even before you worked in the museum, you were familiar with the Holocaust. You knew about the crimes of the Nazis. But after many years, what are some of the things that stand out for you as you come into this sort of? What are some of the things that surprised you about various victim groups?
Many things. One aspect that I find still very absolutely extraordinary and moving is the fact that that when persons were arrested and then incarcerated, they were stripped of their belongings and everything they had with them. And the Nazis at the time would fill out forms, really standard forms, where on the form you would just you would just mark what this person had on them and what would be given away. For example, how many shirts, how many trousers, glasses, a pocket watch, etc. So, and then they would ask the person who was stripped of their personal belongings to sign the form. So it was a very administrative procedure, and it's these documents is really the last, you can see, for me, it's really the last testimony of somebody being a human being and being really stripped of their identity and their lives. And it's helping a lot of people to start a conversation about National Socialism and what are really very mundane aspects of persecution and what it means to be stripped of the very little things that you have with you all the time, like your glasses, for example. And that's one of the parts of the work that I find still, after 8 years, still very moving and still very stunning, actually.
believe the Holocaust happened? That 6 million Jews were slaughtered?
ببینید مسئله تاریخی یک مسئله
Look, historical events should be investigated by researchers and historians.
یک نشانه‌هایی هم وجود داره برای اینکه این اتفاق واقع شده.
There are some signs that it happened. If so, they should allow it to be investigated and researched.
So you're not sure. I'm getting that. You're not sure.
An archives like Bad Arolsen is a custodian of this memory, as are various Holocaust memorials and museums around the world. And yet, of course, we have a phenomenon of Holocaust denial, that the anti-Semites continue to deny the Holocaust, and they engage in various forms of Holocaust denials. And of course, is the Iranian regime, whose leadership repeatedly has a policy of a state denial of the Holocaust, and it spends millions of dollars in a variety of Holocaust denial cultural products. How do you understand and encounter this phenomenon of Holocaust denial? How is there a phenomenon of denying something that is so well documented and well attested to?
Yeah, that's always the question, and always so stunning for people like me, of course. But I think there's a lot of, yes, there's denial, but it's even more revisionism. It means that you won't deny en bloc the entire historical event, but you will say, well, yes, it happened, but it's not the scope and the nature that we've been told about, because here and there we can actually say that it's not documented, and here it's not true, etc., etc. So there is a lot of revisionism, basically, that is actually questioning the happening and indeed the historical occurrence on a local basis in a certain place, and this is still happening. I think unfortunately it's part of a much more larger anti-Semitic narrative that has been running through, I would say, centuries, and which is about this conspiracy by the Jews to tell lies and to present themselves as victims when they are actually indeed manipulating the world. And revisionism is definitely part of this. How to counter revisionism? That's also a very good question, and sometimes I think we're not doing a very good job at that. But who knows how it would be if we were not working against it. I think it's knowledge. Knowledge is everything, and this is why archives such as the Arolsen archives are so important. And I think yes, accessing, making historical documentation accessible to researchers is absolutely essential, and it's one of our objectives.
Tons of individuals in these archives, of course. There are tons of individuals, millions that we talked about. What are some of the specific stories of perhaps being able to connect victims to people in the, of being able to connect families to people in these archives that you find interesting and inspiring?
There's a story, as I'm always very moved about, is a story of Thomas Bergenthaler, who was an American lawyer, and is deceased now. He was also a judge, a human rights lawyer. And when he was a child, he and his parents were incarcerated and deported, and his father died. Thomas was very young, and he survived Auschwitz, and his mother survived as well. And at the end of the war, she sent in an inquiry to the International Tracing Service. She wrote a letter and explaining that she's looking for her son. And the International Tracing Service had a file about Thomas because he was in the care of the Allied forces. So thanks to the International Tracing Service, Thomas reunited with his mother. And they stayed in Germany, and then they emigrated to the US. And he became the famous lawyer that we know about. And many, many years after, he visited the Arisen archives and to look again. And of course, he had he consulted the files of his family, his files, the file of his father. And he said something that has stayed with all of us. He said, there is this archive, this monument of paper, this is his actually expression. He said, is the only graveyard for my father. There is none other. This is the only thing I have. And I think it says a lot about what it meant or it means for many families. And I think what Thomas made of his life is also for me a source of hope and inspiration.